Let's think about that for a minute.
Maybe not.
Yeah, they.
I'm upstairs anyway. Michelle Clark.
And then how, they're streaming it live.
Are they?
Yeah.
Well, that's next one. You're gonna spot the car right there, so. I could be fine.
Oh, that might be good.
Oh, really? You put the camera there? Oh, great.
Yeah, I know. It'll all be on film.
I'm going to call this
Need the mics on.
council to order. We do have a task force meeting in regards to our early learning and child care and Peel situation, and the first office of duty is to turn it over to the clerk and ask the clerk to run the election of the chair and the vice chair. So I'm going to turn it over to the clerk now.
Good morning. Just some logistical things first. Bathrooms, the male washroom, if you go out this door, you're going to have to wrap all the way around the hallway and it'll be on your left. The female washroom is just straight out to the right. Some quick logistical things just on the microphones. Councillors wishing to be placed on the speakers list are requested to press the button located at the bottom center of the microphone stand. It's a big gray button. Pressing the button will place your name in the queue, but please press the button only once. Pressing it repeatedly will then move you to the bottom of the queue. Once you've been recognized by the chair, your microphone will be turned on and the red halo light will come on. Please do not begin speaking until that red halo light comes on. Once you've finished speaking, your microphone will be turned off by staff. So, we'll proceed with the election of the chair and vice chair. Do I have any nominations for the positions of chair for this meeting? Councillor Paderak.
I nominate Councillor Moore.
Just to repeat, Councillor Paderak nominated Councillor Moore. Councillor Moore, do you accept that nomination? Am I allowed to say no? Yes, you're allowed to say no.
I'd like to suggest that perhaps Councillor Miles, as Chair of Human Services, would like to chair.
Councillor Miles, do you accept that nomination? Are there any further nominations for the position of chair? Seeing none, I have a nomination for Councillor Miles to be chair of this committee. Can I see all those in favor? Opposed, anyone? That's carried. To do vice chair now, do I have any nominations for the position of vice chair of this committee? Councillor Miles.
I would nominate Councillor Moore as vice chair. It's not getting off that easy.
Councillor Moore, do you accept that nomination? Are there any further nominations for the position of vice chair? Seeing none, I'll call that to question. The Councillor Moore for vice chair. All those in favor? Opposed, anyone? That's carried. Councillor Miles, can I ask that you take the chair up here? This meeting is now yours. couple amendments to make. So,
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. The clerk is just going to give me a little bit of information on this morning's agenda, so if you could bear with me for one moment.
for 4B.
In regards to the, before we approve the agenda this morning, we do have some amendments. Under 4BI, Vince Tedesco is not present, but Mr. Jim Greaves, Assistant Deputy Minister of Early Learning, is here and will be taking his place. And under 4C3, Réjean Siro will not be here today. So as of that, those are the amendments that I have to the agenda. Is there any additions, changes that the committee would like to put forward? There being none, I would take a motion then to approve the agenda as amended, moved by Councillor Paderak, seconded by Councillor Fonseca. All in favor? That's carried. Great. So, any declarations of conflict of interest this morning? No declarations noted. And under presentations then, we will start off with a presentation by Lisa Durante, who is the Director of Strategic Planning Policy and Partnership Division for the Peel Council Task Force. Good morning, Lisa.
Good morning. Thank you, everyone. My name is actually Lisa Duarte. It's a little tricky. And I'm going to do a brief presentation on the logistics for the task force, and then we'll get right to the speakers. The task force meetings, we'll review the schedule this morning as part of this presentation and confirm the dates as well as the people who will be presenting. The process for the meetings will begin with a brief staff presentation, followed by invited speakers who will provide information and facts related to various aspects of early learning and childcare. Each speaker has been given approximately 10 minutes to provide you with that information. Each meeting will also outline the objectives that we are seeking to achieve, and we will revisit these objectives at the end of each meeting to ensure we have provided sufficient information for the task force. One of the items that's not currently in the schedule that I would like to get your opinion on today is whether or not you would like us to arrange a tour of some facilities. So our own Learn Play Care centers, as well as some other centers within the region, and possibly a full-day kindergarten classroom. We're happy to do that, but we wanted to know if you'd rather do that on your own time and go to a center within your ward, or we can arrange for it so we can show you some different perspectives within the region. So you can think about that, and I'll come back to that at the end of the meeting. For sharing of information, we've provided you with resource binders. You'll see them in front of you. There's quite a bit of information that I will just quickly walk you through in a moment. We've also created a website to house information for staff and the public to access with respect to these meetings. So we'll have agendas, minutes, presentations, and any other information available on that website. In addition, we've created an email address so that anyone who is wishing to provide further information for the task force to consider has an avenue to do so. So if you can just take a quick look at your binders, you'll see in the very beginning we have a table of contents provided at the front, which also includes a copy of the terms of reference, the task force members, and the current approved schedule. Sections B through H are tabbed for each of the task force meetings to house presentations and information provided at each meeting. Section I will be to house any emails that we receive through that mailbox I just mentioned, and those copies will be provided to you through the clerk's office. Sections J through P include literature on a variety of subjects related to early learning and childcare. And within that, in Section L, we've also included ward maps that outline where our centres are within each specific ward. Section Q is some media information that may be useful. Section R contains all of the council reports on this topic to date, and Section S is the KPMG report. And we've included some extra tabs as we go along. We'll be providing you with more information that you may want to include within the binder. The task force members that we have on record are listed on this slide. And as you know, these meetings will occur before regular council meetings and open to any other members of council who wish to join us. So the meeting schedule is in the next few slides I'm going to cover off. This is meeting number 1, where we will cover the logistics as I'm doing right now. And then we'll have speakers speaking to you on the provincial vision and of early learning and childcare and full-day kindergarten. So we'll cover off the legislation and system transformation and full-day kindergarten and extended day programs. Meeting number 2, scheduled for April the 26th, will cover the regional role with respect to the early learning and childcare system. The topics of that day are quality and quality assurance roles, the effects of full-day kindergarten, system transformation, sustainability challenges, and we will have some presentation from early learning and childcare providers within Peel. Meeting number 3 will focus on special needs programming. We will cover off the regional role, which is to provide preschool children in licensed childcare with special needs resourcing support and funding related to that. And then we will cover resource supports and services. We will talk about family experiences and challenges, resource needs, system capacity, waitlist demands, and we will have some parents speak to you who are currently waiting for special needs supports, as well as those receiving special needs supports. Meeting number 4 covers off system funding and possible service delivery options. So this is where we will look at any funding and cost-saving measures, parent fees and per diems, feasibility of lease takeovers, the possibility of phasing out closure of our directly operated centres, and the feasibility of expanded evening care. This meeting has actually been broken in. We've held 2 dates for it because it is a lot to cover off in one meeting. So you'll see meeting number 6 actually is the continuation of this subject. Meeting number 5, you'll see, is June 7th. We've proposed this as an evening meeting, and our topics will be subsidy and waitlist, where we will get into issues around childcare subsidy, the waitlist breakdown and demands, and then some advocacy items. So there will be people speaking about system stabilization, the policy framework, funding mechanisms, and system modernization. Again, this is an evening meeting so that we can facilitate having some parents and the community come to speak to you. So meeting number 6, as I mentioned, is an extension of meeting number 4, so it's just giving us enough time to ensure we've covered off all of those topics thoroughly. And meeting number 7 is the last meeting in our schedule, currently scheduled for July the 5th, where we will recap the objectives from each meeting and, if necessary, use decision trees to help reach recommendations that will form a report back to Council, currently scheduled for September 27th. I also wanted to provide you with an update on our Learn Play Care Centres since our meeting in January with you. The CAO, the Commissioner, and the Director of Early Learning and Childcare have had visits with staff at each one of our centres after the January meeting to have open dialogue and discussion with the staff. Those meetings have had great take-up. They started usually around 6 o'clock, and I don't think they left one of the facilities before 9. So it's helping staff understand why we're doing what we're doing and answering any of their questions. As far as enrollment goes in our centres, as a result of the January 26th meeting, we've created an unstable environment right now. But we have not seen a change at all in our enrollment. It's actually increased slightly since the beginning of the year, around 90 to 94% for 2012. And the patterns are consistent with past trends, and we have a normal amount of terminations and new starts. And we are advising parents when they do come in to enroll their children that we are undergoing this review and we're not sure of the outcome. We are seeing some staffing shifts and changes. Some of our casual staff, we've seen about 14 resignations since November 2011, which is significantly higher than normal. Most of those staff have left for positions with the school board or other childcare providers. As of March 30th, though, we have also hired 10 new casuals, and we have 2 returning from maternity leave, so this will stabilize our current casual pool. We have placed a clause in our new hire letter informing the new hires of the review that's going on and our inability to guarantee employment. And we know that there are quite a few staff, both casual and regular staff, applying to different school boards. We've been completing reference checks for some of them after interviews, and we're also anticipating some staff will resign in August without notice to us prior to that, and will be moving on to school board positions at that time. We are seeing our supervisors and ECE staff maintaining a high level of professionalism and commitment to the quality of their positions and excellent service to our clients. Sonia Pace, our Director of Early Learning and Childcare, has been having coffee chats with parents between 4:30 and 6:30. She's been doing about 2 a week, where she answers questions and provides information, and again, just broadening the consultative process with the parents and opening lines to make sure we have regular communication. We have begun some spring playground preparation after the winter, so we are spending approximately $8,000 per site to make sure that we're up to health and safety codes and all the things that need to happen to make sure that those playgrounds are operational while we undergo this review. So back to revisiting meeting number 1, where we're at today. So for the most part, the logistics have finished with the exception of the tour, if you'd like us to arrange that, if we can discuss that. And then we'll get on to the provincial vision and full-day kindergarten information.
Okay, I'll open the floor to members of committee. Anyone have any comments in regards to whether or not you would like to tour some of the facilities? Councillor Fonseca.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make a comment. I have one Learn Play Care Centre in my ward, Ward 3 in Mississauga, Ernest Majuri. I did go there. I have gone already. And I've also gone to a number of the PLASP locations just in my ward. But I found it very beneficial. It was an excellent opportunity to talk with staff, ask questions, see the children interacting, see the layout, see within neighborhoods how the different, whether it's a class, whether it's within the school, how it has an impact within the neighborhood, the structure of the buildings. When you're on site, you're just prompted to ask a lot more questions. And when I was there, everyone was very professional. I think at Ernest Majuri, I was there for about 2.5 hours. So I just found it was very beneficial. So for anyone else, I encourage you to either go on your own or if staff can arrange a tour. I thought it was very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore.
Thank you. Yeah, I do believe that a tour would be helpful. I think it's the biggest challenge in that is going to be coordinating all of our very busy schedules. And I'm wondering if perhaps understanding that we need to be as least disruptive to those facilities and the classrooms as possible, but provide us or our office with a contact number. So set up maybe 1 or 2 opportunities for visit. If we can't make it and we want to do it on our own, we should at least know who to contact and so we can fit it into our own schedules. And Madam Chair, I do have a couple questions with respect to, are you going to go around the table on that issue, and then we'll come back to some questions on the presentation?
Certainly.
Okay.
Councillor Sanderson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also agree that it'd be a good idea to go on the tours. I visited some of our own and some private ones as well on my own, and found it pretty interesting. And I can't agree more with the former speakers that we need to do that, and for all the good reasons they put forward.
Great, thank you. Councillor Mahoney?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to mention that I had actually had a meeting with parents at the centre within my ward. We had, I guess, circle time for a couple of hours. And I was very pleased with the reaction once we went through a number of the issues and the impacts and the issues that we as a region are facing. And in light of all of the new changes coming forward, I was very pleased that the parents were understanding, empathetic to other families who have needs that are not able to access centers. So that was very beneficial, and I would encourage any other councillors with facilities in their wards to try and sit down with some of the parents. There were staff, some of the staff were there, and that was great. And then, of course, some of the children came along, and that's always a pleasure. But what I would like to see, because I do know the centre in my ward quite well, is I'd like to see some of the other centres. I think we heard on that one day from many parents who had had some really bad experiences, apparently, with other centres. And in meeting with the parents within my community, they talked about some of the bad experiences. So I'd like to know more about that. I'd like to investigate that, and I think it would be beneficial for all of us. And how do we, I tried to assure the parents that we would be working within that private system and a non-profit system to improve situations if required, obviously. And I think it would be incumbent on us to investigate that and take a look at some of the concerns that have been brought forward, and better understand as council in making this decision the operation of some of those other centres. So that would be my personal preference, and I'd be happy to do that alone. I know it's like herding cats trying to get all of us together to try and visit centres, but I'd be happy, but with some assistance from regional staff. Thank you.
Councillor Crombie?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I too have had an opportunity to visit and participate in some of the activities at the Malton Learn Care Play Centres, and it's a wonderful place, and I think it's imperative that we as councillors do tour our sites, but also that we tour the private providers in our wards as well. And I think that it will be logistically impossible for us to do that as a group, so if perhaps staff can guide us to set up those meetings individually, or our own staff can set up those tours individually and privately, so that we have them completed by whatever date we deem the appropriate deadline date. But I think it's necessary that we tour not only our own facilities, but certainly those of the private providers in the area. Thank you.
Councillor Paterak?
Yes, I just wonder, I defer to staff on this, but I just raised the question as to staff to continue to consider when they're scheduling the tour, if it's better that we wait until, say, late May, after we have more information. We could have more informed questions and just more information that we're conversant with the program, and it might be more beneficial later rather than sooner.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that's the end of my speakers. It would appear that members of committee would like to have an opportunity to see a diverse number of the child care centres that are operating, and if the region would be able to provide some assistance for us to arrange some tours, but provide assistance to others who may want to venture out on their own. I think that's the message that I heard back, so we'll leave that with you.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Moore did have some questions in regards to your overall presentation.
Mm-hmm.
So do you want to do that?
Okay, thank you. It may be in one of these meeting schedules, but I'm interested in where and how we might be receiving delegations or submissions from the private daycare providers. Certainly during the marathon day of delegations that we had, we heard from the parents who have children in Peel facilities,
Mm-hmm.
and we heard from some of our staff. But what we didn't hear was from the broader daycare community.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be in
Mm-hmm.
one of these broader bullets that's on one of these meeting schedules, but I think one of the big benefits is hearing from everybody so that we get a more balanced view.
Yes, actually on April the 26th, the schedule that's in your binder that looks like this was the one that was handed out actually at the last council meeting. will show you who's actually invited, and that's where we are inviting some providers from within the community. So we have invited the executive director from Family Day, the executive director from the YMCA, the CEO of CLASP, the chair of the Licensed Home Child Care Network, the chair from CDRCP, and the coordinator of the Early Learning Education Program from Sheridan College. So it will provide you with that perspective from the
Will
providers.
we be hearing from them?
Yes.
Or when you say,
Yes, the task
okay,
force.
so it's, oh, good, okay, so
And
I'm
we-
glad.
Go ahead.
And in terms of an opportunity for parents who have children in other providers, whether they're subsidized or not, is that what you see on the June 7th with the proposed evening meeting?
Yes.
Okay,
We were trying to provide you with perspectives that you didn't hear on January 26th
thank you.
to make the best use of your time, because we know you heard what you heard already,
Yeah,
so.
and it is important that we hear all of the perspectives. And the other question, it's not specifically on your presentation today, but today in the newspaper, there's a bit of negotiation taking place, I understand, between the NDP and the Liberal on the daycare. I don't know the, all the specifics and the details of what Andrea Horvath is asking for, but I think it's an example of how we're not going to be able to make this decision in isolation of other things that are happening around us. So I think that we need to be flexible and able to respond to that. So if staff can, prior to meetings, maybe just put a placeholder on the agenda that we're an environmental scan of what's happening in the media, maybe decisions that the school boards are making that we might not be aware of. Even the report that we have today on our regular regional council agenda with respect to the French language schools and the region's participation in providing support or assistance for them as well. So,
Okay, we can do that.
thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Crombie?
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. That's where I wanted to go as well. I want to hear from providers, not only of our own Peel facilities, but those that provide care for special needs children, is that on the June 7th date, infant care providers, and also any special services providers, such as after hours. If we can, look to groups who provide specialty services, I would be very interested in that as well. And I just wanted to express a concern that probably not all of us will be able to meet every date. I know there are a couple of us that aren't here today, and I know going forward there's at least one that I won't be able to attend, and will that be a problem for us? Will we have retained quorum if people are missing meetings? I know that we want to participate and attend each one, but it might not always be possible because the dates take us up to June where our schedules are already full. So just a concern I'm expressing.
I'll defer to the clerk and the chair. I believe we will have to have quorum in order to have our meetings go forward.
10 members, we need 5 for every meeting.
So there's 10 members on the committee, we would have to have at least 5 in attendance.
The other thing was that I was also asked to look for less than 12 days, which was set out for 12 meetings, so that's why we're down to about 7, trying to work all of it in so that we can sort of get through before the summer comes on and be able to report back in September, which was the request at the time that we had our meeting and our report in regards to that. So we'll work at that.
So perhaps if members know that they're not going to be able to make a particular date, you would let the clerk know as soon as possible, and if we do end up with a quorum issue, then we would make adjustments accordingly.
Madam Chair, I don't know why we couldn't also allow other members that are interested in it to participate at the meeting. So maybe we could still have quorum within the numbers that are here, so we can reach that 5 or 6, whatever it takes to do that.
Okay, great, good. Thank you. So I think we resolved that one. Good. Okay, so we're going to move on then. Lisa, thank you very much for Thank you very much for your presentation. Could I have a motion then to receive the presentation? Moved by Councillor Hames, seconded by Councillor Foley. All in favor? That's carried. Great. Okay, so we're going to move on then to item 4B, and we're going to welcome Mr. Jim Grieve, who is no stranger to us. Very happy to have you back with us, Mr. Grieve, in your role as Assistant Deputy Minister. So even though you're gone, you're obviously not far away, which is good news for us here.
Couldn't be very far away. This is very much like home, Madam Chair. I feel very comfortable, and what a delight to be speaking to members of council and members of this really important task force about a passion of mine, not just a job, but a passion of mine for making sure that we have children ready for life, and that we're supporting parents in the best possible way. And I think the great news today is that I am speaking along with great colleagues. You're going to hear from Shirley Ann Teal from the Peel District School Board. You're going to hear from Sheila McWaters from the Dufferin-Peel Catholic District School Board, and Régent Sirois for the Centre Sud, the Catholic French-speaking District School Board. And then, again, one of my favorites, Dr. Carl Corder, is going to speak to you as well. Today, I'm going to speak very briefly about kind of the vision and the reality of where we are. You would know that we started with a vision, and what attracted me to the job was the Pascal vision that said we really need an integrated, fully seamless system in Ontario to serve the needs of children right across, all children right across the province, and support families right across the province from minimally 0 to 12. And you know, that's a tall task. There aren't too many jurisdictions in the world, I've found, that really have it right yet. In fact, in the connections I've had internationally, everybody is struggling with the same kinds of issues that we are. And so it's good news. We have company out there, and we're connected out there, which is terrific. So it's a pleasure to be able to speak to the task force at the very beginning. I really want to talk about a couple of things. One, where we are with respect to full-day kindergarten, which is a part of the story of that fully seamless, integrated picture. And I also want to talk a little bit about where I think we're going to be able to go in what is badly needed, and that is modernizing childcare. I'll just give you a couple of moments on that as well. Just back to the rationale for all of this. Early learning, and we've talked before, I've been before council a couple of years ago, along with Success by Six and the Peel Children and Youth Initiative, to say the more we invest in children early on and in supporting families early on, the better the life attainment, the better the whole concept of children being really well prepared, not just for school but for life, really is. And it's proven time and time again. The research is so categoric, it just makes sense that we would make this kind of an investment. The difficulty is we want to do it all at once, and you can't do that. You can't afford to do it all at once, so you have to start somewhere. The notion here is that there are huge benefits. The research has been, again, crystal clear. This is not only about setting children up for an experience in school. It's really setting children for an experience lifelong. In fact, the research is so crystal clear that the better the nurturing and the better we support parents from sort of -9 months on, the better the life expectancy and the health expectancy for children will be in later life. They're terrific, very renowned research that has taken place in that area to show that there are better health determinants the more we are committed to helping children and families early on. The other notion here, and for some of the naysayers and some of the audience, and I've spoken to many audiences, you know, for those who are really concerned about the fiscal investment at any time, but particularly at a time when financing and deficits are so critically at top of mind right now, is some of the work that, among others, James Heckman out of the University of Chicago did a couple of years ago with the World Bank. And he indicated in that research that for every dollar you invest in children early on, he's worked out a schema that says to the World Bank there's really, in essence, in those early years, from 0 to about 6, a $7 return, a terrific investment. We'd all race to go and get that kind of return anytime. And in fact, in some later work that has taken place, sort of replicating that and extending the life of those children through adulthood, the figure is closer to $17 when you factor in some special ed avoided, some incarceration, remediation, youth justice issues avoided if we get it right at the beginning, which is a monumental leveraging for the dollars that are being put in place. I know that children's long-term health and long-term mental health is also affected by a great start to early childhood development. So our desired state really is a program that really serves parents, that serves families, and sets children on a trajectory that is for life, not just for school readiness. That for sure is what we're focused on. So just a few facts, if I can, about full-day early learning kindergarten, which I will admit to you is just a piece of that fully integrated system that is part of this long-range vision. But it's an important element to it. So with full-day kindergarten, you would know that we're only at 20% of the population right now. Strangely, when I speak with groups across the province or anywhere, people are so comfortable with the notion of full-day kindergarten, and we learned a lot from the Francophone school boards who've done it for over 15 years in many cases. People assume that we're already pretty much there. You know, the rest is just a mechanical roll it out. When in fact, I think that Sheila and Shirley Ann will admit to you that there's a huge amount of work to be accomplished in the rollout. But we're at 50,000 of the 250,000 children in the province so far. We'll be at 49% come September, so half of the province will have it. It'll be 1,700 schools across the province, and as I say, 49%. Reality says, however, that we're actually higher than that. Parents are not waiting for the time it will arrive in their school, some of them. Some of them have moved houses to be in the area that has full-day kindergarten. Some of them are not sending their children to the private Montessori's or some of those other settings that they have preferred in some cases, personally. Or some of them have said, you know what? I'm going to let my child go to school. I'm not going to keep them home for that year or those 2 years. So our numbers, which should be at 50,000 right now, are actually at 55,000. So you can imagine at full maturity, when we get there, in 2014, there will be more than the 250,000 children that we anticipate coming into the system, because there are kids that are just coming into the system who ordinarily did not through those 2 years of kindergarten. For me, that's good news. Here is the investment that the province has made so far. There was a $200 million investment to support FDK in the first year, $300 this second year. $500 million has been allocated in capital and equipping costs so far. Those are pretty significant investments on the part of a provincial government that has fairly significant difficulties. But if you go back to Heckman's work and you multiply that amount by 7, you see the potential that we are investing in the human population that Fraser Mustard always talked about human population in Ontario. This is capacity building extraordinaire. Certainly in Peel Region, that is absolutely the case. So part of what we rolled out, and the part that is sort of the loose end of this, because full-day kindergarten is part of the way there, what happens for the parents who want to get back in the workforce and need to have the coverage from 7 in the morning until 6 at night. Well, fortunately in Peel, there are providers already in place, the third-party providers like PLASP and Family Day and the Y, who have been for years doing magnificent work inside the schools. And the region has been a significant provider of before and after school work as well. We've encouraged school boards to be the owner of some of that service, and in fact, 8 boards are offering their own version of before and after school in an integrated fashion, such that the ECE, early childhood educator who meets the children at 7 a.m., stays with those children through half of their day with the teacher in full-day kindergarten, and a second ECE comes just before lunch and stays with those children through the afternoon and moves on to the evening program. Is that my bell? Okay, my hook. Okay, this is a great program. I will flash through the rest. I didn't talk too much about childcare. Childcare is a significant area that needs a huge amount of work. I've said in one setting that it really isn't a system. It is a system, but it's a system that cannot be sustained. So we need to modernize it. You can't continue with a childcare system that is based on an act that was written in 1946. Doesn't make sense. We need to modernize it. It needs a funding formula. It needs an infusion of some money. It needs a quality boost, and parents need to understand what quality childcare looks like, because they don't at this point. There's a lot of work to do in that. We're thrilled to be doing it. I won't ask the questions. I'll try and answer your questions. Madam Chair, back to you.
Great, thank you. Did you actually finish your presentation?
Not even close, but that's okay.
Is there any pertinent points in there that you would like us to give you a few more minutes?
No, I'm fine. Let's hear the questions that come from you. This is a very knowledgeable task force. You know where we are and what we're trying to do. Please.
Perhaps we could ensure that all committee members have a copy of your presentation as well. Okay, our first speaker is Councillor Mahoney.
Thank you. Hi, Jim.
Hi.
Nice to see you. The one question that's sort of been running through my mind in this whole process of implementing full-day kindergarten, is there any discussion of mandatory kindergarten? I know it's mandatory, school at grade 1 is mandatory, and there's never been discussion with respect to that?
No.
And would that assist in sort of the implementation?
I don't think so. Honestly, the implementation is so staggeringly fantastic at this point, and the uptake is in the 96 to 97% rate right now. It is optional. Both years are optional. They always have been. The uptake was in the high 80s before full-day kindergarten. What we're finding is that it's increased staggeringly. In countries like Norway, where they begin a full-day childcare program essentially free to all because of the taxation structure they've set, they're at 98% from age 1 on. We're finding the same pattern is emerging here with FDK, that parents really do not want their children to be disadvantaged. They really like the program, and they like the concept behind it, and the program works.
Okay, so there's no need to implement that?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Paderak?
Thank you. Thank you. I enjoyed your presentation. In terms of one of the comments you made at the outset, which was that many jurisdictions are struggling with the right way to do this, you just mentioned Norway, and I guess the exceptions are Northern Europe and parts of the EU where they have had this down pretty good for a long time. Would that be true?
Interesting. It's an interesting observation. You know what I love about Sweden and Denmark and Norway is that they've had very liberal use of early childhood development for a long time. Sweden, 30 years plus. The interesting thing for them, for those countries, is that when you look at the international results of testing, the PISA results, which test 15-year-olds across the world, Sweden and Norway and Denmark and Canada are all sitting right at the top of the world. So they're fascinated at what we're able to do once we get children into the system. So we're actually learning a great deal from each other in terms of the concept. Those Scandinavian countries have quite different, quite amazing parental leave structures and pretty high tax rates as well that go along with them. But we are still, producing children at the end of school or even part way through school that are matching the performance of those children. So FDK is only going to leverage that learning and those results.
Well, in terms of, shall we say, cost avoidance, and you talked about investing the dollar and getting the return. A lot of it is in terms of cost avoidance.
Yes.
And I guess the research should be out there that with children that are socialized at an earlier age into the school system and perform well in the school system, that you don't end up with the dysfunctions, both familial and social, that we tend to experience in North America.
It's a bit of a generalization, but I think, one might make the case that that is the argument behind Heckman's work and many other economists' work. Notwithstanding, there are significant issues that are beyond the control even of full-day kindergartners or parents in some cases. Environmental issues and whatever. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Crombie?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So having always been a working mother, I've always had my children enrolled in full-time programs, whether they be Montessori or whatever. So I wondered what your estimates are, and you may have said, but I may have missed it. What are the estimates for children not participating in full-day kindergarten? So we have stay-at-home moms that don't want to rush their children into school, or we have parents like myself that have otherwise, as you had suggested, there are children already enrolled in quality programs like Montessori, and that may affect our participation, our data going forward.
Yeah. So just back to the other question, can this be mandatory or should it be voluntary?
Right.
We rely so much on really focusing on supporting parents. Parents are the key to helping a child, nurturing a child, bringing them along, and making those key important first few years decisions. There will always be parents like you who will make other choices. Like my own children, and I had the circumstance where my wife stayed home with the children, which is a unique and wonderful opportunity not to be discounted in any way. But, the uptake would suggest that, when we're running at 97% in those first 2 years, that the number who can afford to do that or choose to do that or have that choice is relatively small. One little anecdote, if I can. In almost every location that I've visited, and I've been to, 135 different communities now, speaking with the CMSMs and with the full-day kindergarten and childcare sector. The full-day kindergarten experience, many parents come that first day and say, my guy is only 3.8 years old, and I'm going to pick him up at noon and take him home because he needs a nap and I want him home. That has lasted less than a week in 90% of the cases because the little guy says, everybody else is staying, I'm not leaving, I want to stay. And that, you can talk with Shirley Ann and Sheila about the experiences in Peel. I suspect that's exactly the same.
So you think that will be a cultural adjustment? It'll take some time for parents to adjust to the fact that their 3-year-olds are ready to go to school and can stay all day long.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's a cultural adjustment inside the classroom for teachers who originally thought, well, wait a minute, or childcare or ECEs who said, 3.8 to 4 years old, they probably will need a nap sometime during the day. There are no naps in full-day kindergarten. There's no need for naps in full-day kindergarten. There's an ebb and flow to the program that sort of lowers the activity at some points, and a couple of them do, as they used to anyway in JK and SK, crawl off into a corner with a book sometimes and may snooze a little bit, but there are no naps. It's not nap time.
So you're really looking at 3% of 3 and 4-year-olds that won't participate in the program, that'll have other alternatives, whether they be stay-at-home or Montessori, et cetera.
Yeah, and I think that's where parents have that choice and the wherewithal and the ability to do that, by all means. We don't want to take away anything from the parental role.
And are there any distinctions between school boards, whether they be public, separate, et cetera, francophone?
In terms of the impact?
Or
uptake?
Participation and uptake, yeah.
No, the uptake in all of them is extremely high. The French boards, the francophone boards, established that pattern, as I said, 15 years ago. We've learned a huge amount from them, even though the model that they're implementing is new to them a little bit because they had teachers only, not teacher and ECE necessarily working together. But the uptake across the boards is extraordinarily high.
I noticed a flash slide that mentioned Aboriginal contracts.
Yes.
Would that impact us here in Peel?
Well, we have contracts with it's fascinating it's a fascinating area for me because, while we don't have any ability to impact, unfortunately, education on reserve, we have responsibility for childcare on reserve. So, I'm out next week in Dryden and Fort Francis and Rainy River, visiting a number of the reserves and visiting childcare centers there and speaking with the leadership. Unless there is a reserve, most of the First Nations population or Aboriginal population, Métis, Inuit, are fairly integrated in your system already. And we don't have contracts off reserve. We have contracts, of course, with your CMSM for childcare here.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you. Welcome back.
Good to
I
see
know
you.
some adults who would like to crawl into a corner with a book and have a bit of a nap. It's not just the kindergarten students.
Right.
My question might be more appropriately directed to the school board, so this will give them a heads up if
Okay.
they can get ready. It's the whole flexible boundary issue, and I know 3% seems like a small number, but like overall, but it is still 3% of the children that even a percentage of that may not be going to full-day kindergarten because of the parents' inability to, or lack of desire to want to upset quality daycare because they can't get their children in on a flexible boundary. And so they're making that tough decision to keep them in a daycare setting rather than sending them to, trying to find something in their neighborhood school and disrupting their daycare for the flex boundary. And I know, having been on the school board, it's a huge challenge, but it is a tough decision that parents are making today.
Well, I'll leave the
How
flex
do we-
boundary issues for my former colleagues in the boards. By 2014, that will be a non-issue. It will be in every school in the province. So it'll be infinitely available to any parent who chooses. There will always be...
Sorry, I'm not talking about a flex boundary in order to get them into full-day kindergarten. I'm talking about a flex boundary so they can stay with their daycare provider,
Childcare.
even the before and after, to go to the school that's in their daycare provider's catchment area rather than their home catchment area. And oftentimes parents choose daycare that's closer to where they work than where they live.
Correct.
So I'm just curious as to whether or not we have any inclination of what percentage of that 3% might fall into that category. And I guess it's something that until there's full-day kindergarten,
Yeah.
it's probably going to be a little bit more difficult to get a
Yeah.
handle on. And you mentioned the 3.8-year-old
Hmm.
children. And there was an article recently in the newspaper talking about how educators need to be aware of those younger children in the classroom. And I guess the number that were identified with learning disabilities or ADHD, when in actual fact some of them are practically a full year younger than their cohorts. So it's interesting that, so there's another component to this, and that's the piece, the awareness among the educators and the providers in the classroom of that age range.
I think the age is an issue. I think also having, when we get a fully integrated system, fully integrated means that a child at any age or stage is going to have that critical early intervention and early diagnosis if there are issues, and an opportunity for that child to receive the kind of service, whether it's speech and language or whatever, early on and continued on into school until there's limited need for that service. We don't have that right now, and that's the issue of velcroing childcare into education, which is a fantastic opportunity for us. It needs to be massaged so that we can actually have those who work in childcare and work with parents giving special needs a resource, having an opportunity to apply those skills and those interventions for children, from really 0 through age 6. We're not quite there yet.
Okay, thanks.
I do have one question
Okay.
for you. With the advent of full-day kindergarten for 4- and 5-year-olds, will the province of Ontario still continue to provide fee subsidy for parents who don't want to put their 4 and 5-year-olds into the school system?
A difficult question for me to answer, because we are just at the precipice of, in fact, that's where I'm dashing to now, of agreeing on what the long-term vision for childcare will be and how that's going to operate. If I can very briefly, childcare as it presently stands has a certain amount of subsidy available, a certain amount of wage subsidy available, and a huge number of waiting list parents in Peel and in Toronto and in the major urban centres. We need to find a way to stabilize, in the real sense of the word, stabilize, not just pour, hundreds of millions of dollars to keep it the same as it is, because it's not where we want it to be. It has an act that's out of date, it has no funding predictability, it has no long-term vision. So, what we're doing with the meeting I'm racing off to is getting that kind of 4 or 5 year vision for where we want to go with this, and coming back to the issue of how will these subsidies work and how many more parents will be able to access them. That's the issue that you're raising. You're right.
Okay, great. Well,
Okay.
thank you very much
Pleasure.
for taking the time to come and speak to us this morning. It's really appreciated, and of course you're welcome anytime to join us at any of our meetings.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay. So our next presentation is Shirley Ann Teal, Superintendent of Education Early Learning Program from the Peel District School Board. Oh, members of committee, we do need a resolution to receive the last presentation. Moved by Councillor Sanderson, seconded by Councillor Paterak. All in favour? That's carried. Welcome, Shirley Ann.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And on behalf of our Director, Tony Pontus, and the Chair of our School Board, Janet McDougall, I'd like to say that the Board does appreciate this opportunity to participate in your review of Peel's early learning and childcare system. We all work together to serve the same families. And I think it's that partnership that's made our region so strong and, quite frankly, the envy of many other municipalities. We know that we're here for the children, and we have to do it together. As you can see, this morning I'd like to touch on items that I believe will help inform you as you piece together information to get the full picture of early learning and childcare in the Peel region. This visual is our touchstone. This is from the ministry's program, the Full Day Early Learning Kindergarten program. And if you look at the graphic on the side, you can see that the child is at the center. And coming out from the center, the family, the school, community, and the world, we all have a part to play. And again, we all are doing it for the child. So this is the visual and the vision that we go back to as we're speaking with staff, with parents, and working through our own implementation of the program. Always keeping that child in the center. In your package, you've been provided with 3 fact sheets. Those fact sheets were all produced by the Ministry of Education, and quite a few of the facts that Jim just referred to. I'm hoping they'll provide for you a full overview of the journey the ministry has been on, and by direct relation, the journey that we've been on as a school board as well. We began in the fall of 2009, preparing to welcome 2,730 students into full-day kindergarten for September 2010. In September 2011, our board added another 1,170 students to that total, and we provided the full-day kindergarten program in 26 schools. In planning for both year 1 and 2, we reviewed the readiness of all schools. We looked at considerations such as the social risk index, percentage of low-income families, the impact on the child care providers in the radius around the schools, the EDI data, school academic data. We looked at geographical considerations. We also looked at space availability and capital needs. As I was preparing to look at all of these schools, the information provided through the region's website for the service delivery areas was invaluable. So that is the most amazing website and resource for people looking at what's happening in Peel, so I want to say thank you for that. As we approach year 3, we'll be adding an additional 42 schools for a total of 68 out of a possible 169 schools ready to receive this program by September 2014. 49 schools will be added in year 4, with the final year 5, 51 schools. I've also included in your package a full listing of all of the schools, years 1 through 5, so you'll be able to do a quick check what schools in your ward will be getting it and when. As I mentioned at the outset, it's the partnerships that make it all work. So with the Peel District School Board, we partner with 8 childcare operators. This year it is 7. By September 2012, we will have 8 different partners that we work with to provide that kind of care for our children. There are 22 daycare settings in the Peel District School Board, so that would be within our schools, our partners that run the full day daycare program. And it's my understanding that they will all still be staying over the next few years. We have 81 before school programs. We have 103 after school programs. In the 26 schools, 19 of those schools run an extended day program, and that's specific to the 4 and 5-year-olds. And the extended day program is run right in the kindergarten classroom, so that we can achieve that seamless day that is the vision that started all of this. We have 2 Best Start sites, as you would be aware, one at Brian Fleming in the south and one at Lancaster School in Malton area. Our school board has 4 hubs and 10 readiness centers. The hubs are an area where parents come. We have social work, we have speech-language pathologists, we have outreach workers to the community, we work with the settlement workers, and we work both with parents and children in helping to provide that need. In the readiness centers, we do a lot of the same, although the supports aren't quite as expansive as in the hubs. We also, in partnership with the ministry, have 5 parent-family literacy centers, and they're spread out across the system. And again, parents come in with their children. We provide programs for parents as well as programs for the children, and we're hoping that the ministry, is Jim still here? Jim's still here. We're hoping that the ministry gives us more of those. It's a little editorial comment there. Funding for the full-day kindergarten. Right now, the funding is provided through the ministry to 2 grants to the school board, EPO and GSN. GSN is the general type of grant where you say you have this many children, you're getting this much money. EPO are for special programs. Right now, because the full implementation hasn't been rolled out, that is split into 2 grants. We, in Peel, our total funding per class, is $103,524, and per class expenditures, as you can see, is just a little bit more. And a lot of that has to do with, salaries, benchmarks, all sorts of things, but it's pretty close. I'd like it to be even closer, but. Ministry has also provided us with first-time equipping and minor renovations funding, and that has allowed us to put the instructional supplies into the full-day kindergarten classrooms that we need to create a quality program. It has also allowed us to look at things like maybe we need more washrooms, we might need a better outside play area, all sorts of lowering sinks, lowering toilets, lowering countertops, making sure there's child size sinks in the room, adult size, all sorts of things. So really appreciate the fact that that kind of funding came, because it helps to create the quality program we need. Staffing, the average class size is 26 children to 2 adults, and the funding comes to us by the number of students, not by the number of classes, which is a bit of a challenge for us because children don't fall neatly into categories of 26. So, for example, in Bolton, we might have a class of 21. In Malton, that might be 29 or 30. So it doesn't balance quite as well, and you know, you may get questions from parents or your constituents at some time, well, you know, why is this class less? And you know what, it's the way the funding goes, and we get it by students, so we have to balance across the system. Coming into next September, there's always change in Peel with growth, but coming into next September, right now our system-wide average will be 25.95 to 2, so we're doing good. Don't ask me in September. The ministry has also provided us with additional funds to provide professional development for our staff, and we have been able to do that each year coming into the year, both for the early childhood educators and the teachers, to start building teams. And we work with our principals on a monthly basis, talking about the program and how it would be implemented. Capital funding has come to us each year, beginning in year 2. Year 1 implementation rollout did not have capital funding. Year 2, 3, 4, we were working with the ministry to say, here's what we believe we need in our area, and they would work with us and negotiate and provide money for that capital funding. Successes and challenges. A lot more successes than challenges, I can tell you. The partnerships with the region and the child care providers. Even prior to full-day kindergarten, our board worked with the region and the child care operators to provide quality care and programs. Our involvement in Success by 6, now PCYI, together with Child Development Resource Connection Peel, and participation in many other regional tables, has allowed us the opportunity to meet parent and family needs for school-age and preschool children. There are so many examples. The Best Start program, before and after school programs, working with PELSNA, the Early Learning Special Needs Committee, the Lion, the Hubs. Our board has worked beyond what the mandate is for school boards to meet the needs of early learning. Regional staff, child care operators attended some of our professional development days so that we all knew we were working on the same level. When I started interviewing ECEs, I went to the region. They gave me questions and hints on how to do that interviewing. So it's really a strong partnership. The ECE teacher relationship has been a change in culture for us, but again, it's worked amazingly well. This time we've hired 150 full-time early childhood educators and over 80 casual staff. I will be adding to that 177 more permanent positions for September, and will continue to add for the casual staff. Early research from OISE, and I'm sure you'll hear about that later, has already demonstrated that full-day kindergarten is making a difference. There's significant growth in children, both academically and socially, in comparison to the traditional half-day program. Our most significant challenge in Peel is space and funding. As we move towards full implementation, we're moving into the areas that are quite new. Infrastructure's not there yet. We need a lot more space, and to be able to provide that in a timely manner. The rollout might seem slow to parents. To us, it's very quick when you're starting to talk about building and everything that comes with that. So that's been our huge challenge. Funding, the capital funding, benchmarks might have seemed appropriate a year ago, with labor costs rising, with the municipality saying, yes, we'll give you the license, but you need to do this, this, and this.
That extent.
And they would work with us and negotiate and provide money for that capital funding. successes and challenges. A lot more successes than challenges, I can tell you. The partnerships with the region and the child care providers. Even prior to full-day kindergarten, our board worked with the region and the child care operators to provide quality care and programs. Our involvement in Success by Six, now PCYI, together with Child Development Resource Connection Peel, and participation in many other regional tables has allowed us the opportunity to meet parent and family needs for school-age and preschool children. There are so many examples. The Best Start program, before and after school programs, working with PELSNA, the Early Learning Special Needs Committee, the Lion, the Hubs. Our board has worked beyond what the mandate is for school boards to meet the needs of early learning. Regional staff, child care operators attended some of our professional development days so that we all knew we were working on the same level. When I started interviewing ECEs, I went to the region. They gave me questions and hints on how to do that interviewing. So it's really a strong partnership. The ECE teacher relationship has been a change in culture for us. But again, it's worked amazingly well. This time we've hired 150 full-time early childhood educators and over 80 casual staff. I will be adding to that 177 more permanent positions for September, and will continue to add for the casual staff. Early research from OISE, and I'm sure you'll hear about that later, has already demonstrated that full-day kindergarten is making a difference. There's significant growth in children, both academically and socially, in comparison to the traditional half-day program. Our most significant challenge in Peel is space and funding. As we move towards full implementation, we're moving into the areas that are quite new. Infrastructure is not there yet. We need a lot more space, and to be able to provide that in a timely manner. The rollout might seem slow to parents. To us, it's very quick when you're starting to talk about building and everything that comes with that. So that's been our huge challenge. Funding, the capital funding, benchmarks might have seemed appropriate a year ago, with labor costs rising, with the municipality saying, yes, we'll give you the license, but you need to do this, this, and this, which is really beyond full-day kindergarten. We're finding that the funding for capital isn't quite as much as we would like, and as a result, we will see some of our full-day kindergarten classes in regular classroom size next year, but we're continuing to have a quality program we're very excited about. Thank you. I think I went over.
Great. Thank you very much. Are there any questions of committee? Okay. Pardon me? We have no questions on the board. I do have one question for you in regards to wages of ECE and staff. And traditionally, I think we all believe that early childhood educators have been underpaid, and as a result, there's been some top-ups from the provincial government. Do you believe, as 4- and 5-year-olds are fully integrated into the school system, that there will have to be a natural increase in the wages that ECEs are paid? And is that why they are gravitating towards the school board?
Wow, that's a loaded question. Okay, let me answer that on a personal note.
Okay.
I couldn't agree with you more that historically, early childhood educators have not been recognized financially for the important work that they do as compared, to teachers. So going forward, the ministry has provided a benchmark for early childhood educators and what they would be paid for on an hourly basis, and it is quite, comparative across a number of areas. Our board does go beyond that just a little bit. It's a collective bargaining year for all groups. There's no doubt in my mind that will be a huge item of discussion. absolutely, it's such an important time. They are doing such an amazing job, and an important job that I could never disagree with. You know, should the financial compensation start to move to more towards what we might see in all educators. And do I think it will happen? Yes. Do I think it will happen so it's equitable and soon? No. I mean, if you look at today's economy, I think we need to build towards that. Is that the reason that people are moving towards school boards? I don't believe it's probably the deciding factor. I think there's a lot of uncertainty in the childcare world with full-day kindergarten and what's coming down the line. And there isn't a person, I think, in this room or anywhere that isn't saying, you know, I need to really look out for job security because what I do affects my family, and that's the most important thing in the world. I think in some cases, the hours in a school board might be more inviting than in the daycare. In daycares, people will work, either shift work, or they may work till 7 at night, 6. School boards, as you know, would finish reasonably short time after the children go home, even though it frequently means taking work home with you, but the hours are different. And, you know, if you're a working mom, as I was all those years, having the same PD days, vacation days as your children, wow, that's huge. So, you know, if I had to make some assumptions, I would say that's a pretty big draw.
Okay.
Plus the fact we're wonderful.
Thank you for that answer. Could I have a motion, please, to receive the delegation, moved by Councillor Moore, seconded by Councillor Crombie. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Our next presentation is Sheila McWaters, Superintendent of Programs from the Dufferin-Peel Catholic District School Board.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for the opportunity to come forward to the task force to share some of the work and the stories and the learning that we have had within the Dufferin-Peel Catholic District School Board, and certainly alongside of and in partnership with our coterminous boards and the Region of Peel. And today, as part of our work, it is about collaboration, and so our team today are sharing and will be a part of the presentation, giving voice to different elements of our work together. Silvana Reda is principal at George Vanier Catholic School and has full-day early learning for the last couple of years. Nancy Talevi, who's the Facilities and Accountability Officer within our Planning Department, and Dan Reedy, who's our Program Coordinator. So together we will share with you some of our stories and the voices of our families, our children's learning, our staff learning, and our collective work together. On behalf, as well as the Director, John Kostoff, and Mario Pascucci, our Chair, we know that Dufferin-Peel, in the context of Dufferin-Peel, we have both the Peel region and the Dufferin sector of the board. And so within our board, about 85,000 students, day students, maybe about 40,000 adult and continuing education students. We offer, for our elementary schools, the sector is a JK, originally JK to grade 8, just to give you a context of the way that the board is set up. And then, of course, our high schools. The long history within the board of having early childhood, junior kindergarten, senior kindergarten has been with us extensively. As a Catholic board, we are grounded in our social Catholic teachings and rooted in the gospel values. And so what governs us and is at the core of our work is what we would call our Ontario Catholic School graduation expectations. And this is a vision for the formation of our children and families what we are espousing to and hoping to help to shape and develop what we hope that they will become. So as we do all of our work, you can see the previous slide referenced those 7 key areas or expectations, and that is governed and grounded within the Ministry of Education's mandate. Was previously referenced through the Deputy or Assistant Deputy Jim Greaves and Shirley Ann from the Peel Board. Our work is grounded in ministry directions, and certainly the work of Charles Pascal in 2009 gave us some excitement and next step look at how it is that we would be able to embrace and look at extending full day learning in and across the deaf and Peel community. The 3 areas that our ministry focuses on, 3 key goals, is looking at raising the bar, closing the gap, and inspiring public confidence. And as is noted in the notations here, we see that from early work right through to our students moving on to learning for life.
What we'd like to say as well, by way of context, is that we begin working with our families and with our children, in some cases even before the children are born. It's really one of our underlying beliefs that coming into a Catholic community is a whole life, full body experience, and we begin that and always look to keep the child in mind and imagine from a kid's eye view, are we helping them have a seamless family and a seamless learning and a seamless community caring experience from before they start school to when they come into school. When they finally arrive at school with us, are our programs developmentally appropriate? Are they meeting the kids who are really coming to us? Are they play-based? Are they involving parents? Have we been involved with parents? Have we been involved with the community already so that by the time we meet these kids at kindergarten graduation time, we have some form of relationship with them? So you see the traditional notion of the school board working within the bounds of kindergarten to grade 1 to grade 12 is getting to become a pretty old idea. We begin, as we say, meeting them when they're born. Because of our Catholic community context, we meet them at baptism time, we meet them in the parishes, we meet them in places like the St. John Fisher Neighborhood Learning Place, we meet them in places like the Ontario Early Years Centers, we meet them in our parent-family literacy centers, we meet them on the Learning in Our Neighborhood Lion bus, all in an attempt to get to know the family, get to know the community, understand what the community needs so that our schools are pitched to meet and reflect the community once the kids come from outside the school learning to inside the school learning.
Okay, I want to give you some information on the numbers, statistics, how do we rack up. Our first year in the program, we started with 16 schools, 1,248 spaces. They were entirely filled, to the large extent with in-boundary children. We do, because it's a limited funded program, we do require that students live within the geographical catchment area of the school to get first priority for available spaces. Even still, we have been oversubscribed. As Jim pointed out, Shirley Ann, this program has been extremely popular, and the wants from the community have exceeded the funding capacity that we have been able to extend. So we have been operating at 100% in year 1, 2010, 2011. We had a class size of 26-1 across those 16 schools. In year 2, which is our current year that we're in now, we added on 8 schools, so we have a total of 24 schools operating this current year. For 2012-13 is where we see our biggest jump to date. We will be reaching 55 sites, which will be about 48% of all 4- and 5-year-olds in our system. That equates to 4,472 funded spaces. In 2013, we will add on another 81 schools, and then we get to 2014 where we'll be at 100% funded. At least we're assured we will be at 100% funded, and that's 124 schools. Okay, as I mentioned, this is a 5-year phased-in program that the province initiated and Jim went over. In terms of selecting the sites, we very much were looking at a number of different factors. Shirley Ann mentioned a number of them: the physical plant, what was available in terms of physical space, the social risk index, EDI, student achievement records. The geographical location was a key essential ingredient to make sure that we didn't have, because we only had 16 sites, that they were all clustered in one area of the municipality, and other municipalities got none. Again, keeping in mind that Dufferin-Peel does include Dufferin, so we have Mississauga, Brampton, Caledon, and Dufferin to cover within our allocation. There also was a lot of consideration given to the impact on surrounding childcare programs. Clearly, there is going to be an impact, there has been, and it will increase the more sites and children that get admitted to full-day kindergarten. We did not select the sites in isolation within our school board. We do have a stakeholder or coordinating group at our board that all of these decisions are made from, but we do consult with the broader community sector, and there is a regional stakeholders group of which our board and the Peel board are a part of. Region of Peel staff have been a part of, and there's also been some others that have come in on an as-needs basis. The physical learning space, in all its situations, our schools are junior kindergarten to grade 8, so that's where these programs are. They are all combined programs. So 4 and 5-year-olds, it's one program. We no longer have all the 4-year-olds, JK in one room, SK in another class. It's all combined, a 2-year program for 4 and 5-year-olds. As Shirley Ann mentioned, in our board, it is also a requirement that the extended day program share that physical space with the core program, so that they can share not only the physical space but the resources that are there, and it also lends to a more seamless day for parents. The ministry has provided some startup funding that was previously mentioned for some first-time equipping, and also for some minor retrofits like additional cubbies, the playground upgrades, washrooms where needed. We have also been able to access some capital funding for in a small number of cases, and those projects are ongoing and will be ongoing through the completion of implementation stage. We have also received some ministry money for resources to enhance, not to start from new, but to enhance and the existing learning resources that we currently have.
So the day itself for our FDK students is the same as all the other classes in our school. The children and the staff are very much an integral part of the whole school community, and they share in our faith, cultural, and learning activities. So more so than when they were in a half-day program. It's a partnership between a certified teacher and a designated ECE. So it is a very close relationship, a close working relationship, and working really well in our board. The board-wide average is 26 students per class, and like the Peel board, that can vary from school to school, 24 to, I believe, 29. The key thing is that it is a play-based curriculum, as the ministry document outlines. So there has been that change. And there is ongoing support for staff with orientation and ongoing professional development for staff members.
Okay, extended day program, it does operate currently or has to date in most schools. We are now ensuring that there is an operator appointed for every single elementary school. Those programs would be offered for 6 to 12-year-olds, and in addition, we will be looking at the need where there is sufficient need to have a separate program for the 4 and 5-year-olds. Again, that program would share the physical space with the full-day kindergarten program. So they would be running as 2 separate programs, 6 to 12-year-olds and 4 to 5-year-olds, where the numbers warrant. It is actually a requirement that boards do on an annual basis, a thorough review to make sure that the community needs are being met. So even if for 1 year the school does not have programs due to lack of interest, does not to say that forever and a day they will not have them. We will continue to review and monitor and would implement where necessary. We have chosen to partner up with our long-standing partners, the YMCA of Greater Toronto, Family Daycare Services, and PLAS Childcare Services. We've been partners for a number of years, and they are natural partners to be paired with for the 4 and 5-year-old program. The board does maintain ownership of these programs, i.e., at the end of the day, we're responsible for them, but it is a third-party delivery model that we are using. School hours our program hours are from 7:30 in the morning to school start, and school end till 6 p.m., and that's school days and professional activity days only. There is no vision at this point in time to be looking beyond those days. So during school breaks, evening hours, those sorts of things would not be something we are contemplating at this time.
In terms of registration, before we had our formal registration, we did have our special needs information night for those parents who do have children with special needs, so that they had that. During registration week, the registration was just for the in-boundary families only, and at that time we did provide each family with a child care survey so that we would have the information in terms of being able to offer the extended TAFE program. And our before and after school partners were also at the school to provide the information to parents. One thing that we do note is when they come in February for registration, they don't want to think about before and after school when they're sending their children to school, but the reality is come September, they need that. Beyond registration week, we still continue to accept applications where spaces are available, and then we do have a welcome to kindergarten night for our new families, but we also invite our new families to other things that we have going on at the school that may help them to get ready for kindergarten. And being a Catholic learning environment and a school, we honor all our students, especially those with diverse learning needs. And the key is that fairness isn't the sameness. So we keep that in mind as we're working with all our children.
As with other school boards, we don't operate in a silo. We don't operate alone. We operate in conjunction with advice and advisors from the community. So be it Success by Six, be it PCYI, be it the Peel Early Learning Special Needs Advisory Committee, we're constantly taking the temperature of the community, hearing the stories from the community about how well we're serving kids with diverse learning needs and getting to know who the kids are with diverse learning needs, again, before they even arrive at us. Arrive and come to us. We're also tremendously concerned with receiving our newcomers. We have 2 centers, newcomer reception assessment centers, where any newcomer families bring their children for English language and mathematical skills assessment so that we can get their individual programs up and running from the day they're arriving at school, really taking care to know the family as well as possible, as soon as possible. We don't do it alone. It's a tremendous cast of community partners that we work with. You know them, you're familiar with them, you've met them, and we value them tremendously, right across Peel, right across Caledon, and right across Dufferin. Without them, we can't know our community, we can't serve our community.
Conscious of time, we do want to, though, comment on celebrating our successes, and as was referenced, the successes are a product of a number of people coming together, collaborating, as you've heard referenced already, and certainly in our work with the region of Peel, it has been an extremely positive way for us to be able to look at supporting one another and supporting our families. The rest of your package provides you with some clips of parents' comments, of some staff comments as well. As part of our work in the board, we have been looking at some research that would give us some indication of where we're at, what's the pulse of what work is going on, and where might we learn and grow from that. So we leave with those voices and those stories. In particular, the very last slide has a graph chart that identifies within a survey that we're doing year 1, 2, and beyond satisfaction, and certainly you can see in the areas of developmental progression, both parents and staff unanimously are seeing the benefits or commenting on that. And I know that you will hear more from those from the OISE study as well. So just to wrap it up, again, coming back to who we are and how we work together. Certainly as a Catholic community, we look forward to continuing to grow and to develop and to work on, as Jim referenced earlier, modernizing and enhancing and extending our learning together. And we'd be happy to take any questions.
Our first question is Councillor Mahoney.
Thank you, and I think actually this is a question. I've got a couple of questions. Thank you for your presentation. And perhaps these questions go, I should have perhaps asked Shirley Ann as well, but also to Region of Peel staff. Do we have, or do either of the boards or all of the boards have numbers as to how many children, had there not been the availability of full-day kindergarten, would have stayed in full-day daycare? Are those numbers at all available so that we can sort of as a committee track those attendances? Or?
Through the chair, I know at the board level, certainly we would have, as you know, the registered students. In our work with the region, with PELSNA, and both boards, Peel and Dufferin-Peel, we've had the dialogue around how is it that we recognize, you know, what the needs are for families who are choosing not to attend full-day learning, but we don't actually have the statistics, certainly at our board level at this point in time. What we do know is, as was referenced both by Jim Greaves and Shirley Ann, is that we are getting more parents who are looking at programs and saying, gee, I would really like to attend. I hadn't thought about a full day before when it was half day, like how would I coordinate and ensure that I had some transparency in the care and school. But we have that from a system level, but not
Yeah, I think those numbers might be helpful for us in assembling all of the information that we need, if it's possible. I don't know how you track those numbers, but probably would be helpful. And perhaps this is a good stage in the process to try and find some of that information because of the percentage of schools that are full day and the percentage who have not yet gone to full day. So from here on in, it might be something that's possible to try and track. The other issue is, and again, I should have asked Shirley Ann, and I perhaps will ask when the French board comes as well. You touched on special needs children, and I know in our discussions with many of the parents, that's a real concern. The attention parents feel that their special needs children receive so much more towards their development and their growth within our centres. And again, to Shirley Ann, and maybe something she can provide offline. How are the efforts towards accommodating those special needs children? You did touch on it. I recognize that. I appreciate it. But can you perhaps expand on it a little bit? Are there more efforts put into now because of full day and the connections to all the other agencies? And you did mention the other agencies and partners and stakeholders involved, but it is one of the complaints that has come back, and I think all of us have received those concerns from parents of special needs children.
I think the program itself is inviting to all students because it is play-based, it is developmentally appropriate, it isn't sit down and everyone does the same thing. So there is that opportunity for young children with special needs to be able to play and work at their level. And then the teachers are also able to move around the room more and work with smaller groups of students as need be. But at the same time, there are also additional supports given in terms of child and youth workers that are in the school that are also going into the kindergarten to provide support. If there is a need for ERW support, then that's also looked at. What is happening is because a lot of the children are young when they're coming, many of them have not been identified as having a special need. So it's happening sooner. So whether it be something as simple as hearing, vision, things that you might not notice at home because it's your only child, but then when the child is in a large group of students, then the teacher indicates something, and so then the parents are able to get the support from outside agencies as well, so that we're working in partnership. So it is a matter of us getting to know the children, their needs. There is an opportunity for all to be working and playing at their level, and because it is more developmental geared, then it is geared to all the children.
Just another comment in relation to that. Shirley Ann referenced it, and certainly we did in our slide. One of our very critical points of focus is on transitions. And so looking at how is it that we would work with families, with childcare centers, or working with our professional staff, speech and language, social workers, etc., so that the transition for youngsters, be it whatever their needs are, is as smooth as possible. And so that happens well in advance of the February that was referenced here. We begin that work in the very early years in the kinds of partnerships that we talked about and getting to know what's available, but also then in our work with families in the connecting. So more to do on it, but certainly one that is a focus for us.
To personalize a little bit, some 30 years ago, it took 2 years to get my son IPRC'd in the deaf and peel system, and then once he was put into a closet because there were no classroom spaces, but I'm sure things have improved since then. I'm not bitter. What about July and August? What about those times? I mean, again, with our daycare system, with any daycare system, it's a 12-month program and a 12-month process. So children with those special needs is there a continuum through those periods in any way? Or can there be? And I'm probably putting Deaf and Peel on the spot when it belongs perhaps with the ministry and perhaps with Peel and with all of us as partners, but is there that ability?
We do have literacy camps for students SKH to grade 8, so the kindergarten students whose parents choose to have some extra support, they can have that as well. I also know that in partnership with Peel Speech and Language, Erin Oak, there are summer programs, and some of the children are also involved through those programs.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Mahoney, I'm wondering if that's not a conversation that we can have with the other daycare providers when they come, is how we bridge that gap for all children, but especially those with special needs. So maybe when we meet with the other providers, that's a great question.
I agree. It's something that we need to ask of all the partners who are involved in working with our young children. Thank you.
Councillor Crombie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to declare my bias that I'm a product of the separate school board system, so and some of my questions will be based on my personal experience. And I think you provide a wonderful learning environment. It's a kind of a holistic environment that you provide where you integrate the religious aspects. So I just anecdotally, what are the differences in approaches and outcomes, maybe through integration or acceptance of full-day kindergarten between the two boards, the separate and the public? Do you think, or do you know?
What I would like to comment in relation to that is our first slide that talked about our Catholic graduate expectations, and that is really sort of a rooting of which we are centered in terms of welcoming children to the community and to the schools, as well as in supporting children and family all the way through. the Ministry of Education definitely gives us the direction around curricular expectations. What we are able to do, certainly within the Catholic District School Board, is ground that within our faith teachings, and so that all of the work and the relationship building is really centered on that dignity of self, dignity of others, and how it is that we support that as a community going forward, because we are part and parcel. You talked about holistic, a community within a school board, but also living within a larger community. So what is it that we are able to help our children to better understand and to bring forward as responsible citizens going forward? The area that you referenced in terms of variances, in the Catholic Board as well, I know that the supports that we provide, and I can't speak specifically to Shirley Ann's board, but definitely that holistic layering of supports for children's needs is one that looks at inclusivity that we would strive towards, and certainly we know that all boards do that. But by being able to ground that in our virtues and our faith teachings, we can speak about that and work towards that explicitly on a day-to-day basis.
And a related question, the one concern I have is that both boards seem to have moved away from the JK-SK approach to learning. And maybe we can just talk about that for a minute. I benefited because I went to JK in a public school, and my mother just switched me over to a separate school, and they took me right into grade 1 at 5 years old, or was I 4 years old? I don't remember, but I was a year ahead of my peers. I was a year younger. And it seems that through your presentation that we've abandoned that approach to learning for 4 or 5-year-olds. You've now integrated all the JK and SK children, and there's no distinction. And it seemed to be the word was play-based rather than learning-based for all the kids. Is that true? Do we not separate? Is there not merit to separating the younger ones from the older ones and focusing on learning appropriate for each age group?
On balance, when you look at a group of 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, they're in a tremendously fluid stage of development. They're at a particular stage when they arrive one day, a growth spurt, a formative experience at home, in the schoolyard, in the classroom, can move them forward at a tremendous rate. So we found that the benefits of separating them and treating 4-year-olds or 3 and 4-year-olds differently than 5-year-olds was outweighed by having 4 and 5-year-olds in a classroom together, sharing those common experiences, so that if you've got 5-year-olds developing maybe at a little later rate, and you've got 4-year-olds developing at a little quicker rate, then they're not going to stand out and appear to be as different if they're isolated into particular age groups. Because as we say, 4 and 5 is a very fluid developmental level. And so when we've got them all together, we've got them all learning together, and we've got them learning in a little more homogeneous learning group across a continuum.
Well, you're the expert, so you're the expert, so I'll accept your premise, but I don't know, I think that 5-year-olds are a little more developed and are a little capable of more learning, and I'll tell you my concern. Split classrooms are one of my biggest pet peeves. You don't mind when your child is in the younger year, but when they're the older year, you feel like they're at a disadvantage. And I think you're disadvantaging 5-year-olds by combining them with 4-year-olds.
The piece that we didn't discuss because it was a short presentation is the intentional teaching that goes in the play-based program.
Okay.
So the environment is set up as a third teacher in the classroom. The good things that were happening in half-day programs have not been abandoned, because we would be doing a disservice to children, and that's not what learning is all about. But they do learn through playing. But that doesn't mean there isn't an opportunity for small group guided practice, as we tend to call it. So a teacher working with 3 to 5 students on what is developmentally appropriate for those children. So for our 5-year-olds who are ready to be reading and having more of those reading and written experience, they certainly are getting that. Because we don't want to abandon the good things that we know about teaching. For those SKs at this time of year who still are having some difficulty with their ABCs or learning to read, they're getting more direct teaching, but it's geared to what they need. So as opposed to doing a whole class lesson on this is what everyone is doing, but for the children who already know that, they're bored, or for the children who don't understand that, they're still not getting it. What the full day program, especially with the ECE and the teacher, 2 people in there, are able to work with 2 smaller groups at the same time, or one person is focusing on a smaller group while the other person is moving and playing with the children, and we're getting the information that we need to then inform our teaching. So the teaching learning is still continuing.
So can a younger child, a 4-year-old who's advanced, get the same learning
Absolutely.
as the 5-year-old? Do they have the opportunity to move on to grade 1 if they're already reading and writing?
Well, so what we
And
do,
what about the older child who needs more attention?
So what we do is we expand learning breadth-wise rather than just so that there's more experiences. There's always more learning at that level.
I think I'm
that
getting
can be
into the
happening.
minutiae here. That's something that's not our expertise. But anyways, it was just an interesting conversation and comment.
Great question, because we've got a grand diversity of kids from a grand diversity of backgrounds, from having spent their formative years of 1, 2, and 3 living in a basement apartment with very limited experiences and very limited knowledge. And we've got kids that have been to Montessori.
Right.
They've got tremendous advantages. And they can learn from each other, but with 2 educators in the room, we can more precisely design their learning experience from day to day.
But please don't think that there isn't teaching going on at this time.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Just bring us back a little bit, and maybe these are the kinds of questions and learning opportunities that we have when we do our little tours of the various facilities. Really, it's an active learning opportunity for us. So, Councillor Crombie, are you finished? Okay, thank you. Councillor Fonseca.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to go back to, you mentioned early on in the slides that you chose schools for full day based on proximity to either daycares or, I guess, daycares. Is there a formal outreach to those daycares?
Sorry, we did work through very closely with the Region of Peel, who then in turn was in contact with the child care providers. We, as well, with our 3 partners that we use for third-party delivery of the extended day program and 6-12-year-old program, we did meet with them regularly also. So they're not the only operators out there, but certainly the majority of them, they're the 3 largest in the area. So we did have ongoing communication with them as well.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's great. And as far as there's some information put on, you attached some survey information. I think Councillor Mahoney might have brought this up. But do you have any surveys from, because one of our topics of discussion with the transition between daycare and kindergarten is the special needs students. Do you actually have surveys where there's information from those parents on challenges or input on experiences with their first day from transition from daycare into full-day kindergarten?
Yes, through the Chair. The survey that has been referenced in the presentation did include parents with special needs as well as, well, it would include it all. So what isn't filtered out of that would be some specific elements related to that. But the other area that we do an extensive amount of work, I referenced earlier about transition planning in our parent information evenings for special needs students, as well as our visits that staff will do to the child care center that the parent may have the child attending, or to the home in advance, well in advance, of the school year, and in planning, that information is gathered. Parents fill out survey information specifically about their own child, their needs, and that is part and parcel of what I referenced earlier about the look at then the team coming together with the family in saying how is it that we can continue this and support the transition. So that, to your question, we would have a variety of means of gathering that evidence and data from our community.
Okay, that's great. And one last question around the extended day programs. I'm not sure who addressed it. I apologize. I can't remember. But there, you said there was a separated out 4 and 5-year-olds they're separated out from the 6 to 12-year-olds. That's currently in place in all schools?
It is currently in place, not in all schools, only in schools where there's sufficient demand, so where there are enough 4 and 5-year-olds to have a separate group of them. In situations where there is not enough, the 6 to 12-year-old program is still operating, and there is provisions in the Day Nurseries Act to take a small number of 4 and 5-year-olds and add them into that program, so that's what we've done. We do have, at the very least, the 6 to 12-year-old program operating at every single school with the exception of one. We did try to start the program and the numbers were just not there for either age group. So that's the sole exception, and again, we'll review for next year.
And do you have surveys from parents from that extended program as well?
We do. We do an annual survey combined with kindergarten registration. We have the appointed child care provider participate, as Savannah mentioned, in kindergarten registration night, so they're there to answer questions, hand out their information. We post information on the board's website, there's as well a survey that the parents fill out when they come at kindergarten registration, or if they miss kindergarten registration, they come at a later date, they can fill out information related to their current arrangements and what they are hoping their arrangements would be for the following year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have no other speakers. I want to thank you very much for your presentation and for joining us this morning. And would someone like to move for receipt of the presentation? Councillor Sanderson, Councillor Foley, all those in favor, that's carried. And now we do have another presentation, Carl Corder. Thank you for joining us this morning. And we're running pretty close to the wire here, but I think this is an important presentation, so we'll turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you. I'm here to present Year 1 findings from what's being called the Full Day Early Learning Kindergarten Peel Research. And it's a partnership among the region, the boards, and the Dr. Eric Jackman Institute of Child Study, part of OISE University of Toronto. The principal investigator, Jeanette Peltier, cannot be here this morning because she's attending an international research conference. Before I tell you the results, some of the results, just a sampling of results from this study, I want to say congratulations to all of you for this partnership that you've established here in Peel, not just creating the organization, but the vibrancy of what's going on among the partners. This working group who's looking at how you can take ideas and evidence and put it into the best practice to support children, I think this is really remarkable. And I think the comments from council members, the questions, the presentations, it really stirs my soul. And before I present those results, I also want to establish my local credentials to say that 40 years ago I began my career lecturing down the road at a place called Erindale College about the importance of the early years. And I thought I was a voice in the wilderness, not that Peel was a wilderness back then, but it was more of a wilderness. So this is delightful. We've had 5 children go through the Peel District School Board. As a parent, I wrestled with the issues of what about child care for my children. And some of the arrangements we found here were dismal. I must tell you. Some of them were stellar. And so I think what you're doing is going to help future generations of children, and it's very, very important. So let me go through this research relatively quickly because I know it's late in the meeting. It's a very rich data set, and as I try to figure out the arrows here, next, okay, good. I want to make the point that this is really part of an ongoing partnership that's been underway for several years, which began with the question of how is Peel's Best Start experiment evolving and what can we learn from that? And you all know about Best Start. So in that study, it was Best Start sites compared to control sites where there was no special integration of services around the Best Start program. It was simply good half-day kindergarten programming. So two groups were being examined. With the onset of full-day kindergarten, the study expanded to include a group of sites implementing the full-day program. And the study that was underway was really to look at the implementation of Best Start and now full-day early learning. So what happens as these programs roll out, and how well is the implementation working? That's a key question. And then the other thing we ask is, what about the outcomes? Certainly the child outcomes are what everyone's interested in, but there are outcomes for how staff and programs develop, their quality, how staff work together in these integrated programs, what are the effects on families and parents, and on children. So I'll certainly spend time on the children, and what I'll feature is the implementation findings about full-day early learning kindergarten, and then some comparative data on children in full-day versus half-day control sites. So the research design of the study is, the larger study is that there are three groups. I'll only talk about the control and full-day groups today. All of these groups are being followed longitudinally, that is not just kindergarten, but what will happen in a few years when they show up in grade 3. There's a variety of different kinds of data, from numbers to more qualitative narratives from interviews and focus groups. If you're interested in the findings in more detail, there's a report that you can access online. This is a fairly large study. It's not every child in full day compared to the control groups, but it's a reasonable sample given the depth of information that's being collected. We'll talk about three areas, spending most time on children, but back to the issue of implementation. What's happening in these full-day sites? We find that out by giving staff surveys to the teachers, the ECEs, the principals, the vice principals. We also hold focus groups in which all of these educators come together, the people delivering the program, and we go through benchmarks that indicate the kind of change along the way to being more integrated and working together. We also collect information on the quality of the programs, that is, environmental ratings, looking at activities, space, and furnishings. And we're not going to talk about all these data, but these are data that come from the surveys to the educators. So the blue bars are the ECEs, the green bars are the kindergarten teachers, and did I say that right? Blue bars are ECE, green are kindergarten teachers, and the purple bars are the principals and VPs. And this is sort of agreeing with the proposition that it's really important to bring kindergarten and child care together, not have them in separate, disconnected ways that may not support children's development. And you can see that all of the groups of educators either the vast majority agree or strongly agree that these two realms really need to be united. So the people in these programs think this is a good idea on the whole. You can see the group that disagrees a little bit more, even though it's a minority, are the kindergarten teachers more than the other two groups, that maybe this isn't such a good idea. So there is some resistance among a minority of kindergarten teachers, and I think that's always the case when you implement something that's really new and requires people to modify their roles. Another question is, do you think, in your experience in your full-day classroom, is there a hierarchy, a status difference between ECEs and teachers? And you can see that in the majority of classrooms, a hierarchy is not being perceived. So the team is really working together the way it's supposed to. So that's good news. But again, you can see when a hierarchy is perceived on the right, it's more often the ECEs who feel that than the teachers who say, oh no, we don't really have a hierarchy, it's a team. I told you about that benchmarking using a focus group of the whole group who are putting this program together in various sites. They come together and discuss how they're doing. I won't go into the details, but this is a benchmarking of what they're saying about how well they're working together in three areas: early learning programs, early learning teamwork, and how well do we integrate the parents. So this is one school that shows that overall they're moving from, or they've already achieved some level of collaboration, moving towards full integration of the program. That's the first set of bars. They have some room to go on the early learning team and on integrating parents. So even in the first year, they've begun to move along the path to real collaboration. That's good, but there are areas to improve on. For example, at this school, it's reported that teachers and ECEs don't really have that much common professional development, which is an important thing to have when you're trying to build a team. In contrast, another school, not in contrast, because again, another school reports overall levels of working together that are quite good, and at this particular school also report that there's joint professional development more than at the other school, which is a really good thing to have. So what about the parents? I mean, I think I don't need to say much about the parents because we heard from Duffer and Peel Catholic Board about their surveys of parents like this, and I think the surveys that we would talk about bear this out. We also do something where we ask about parent daily hassles, and we find that the integration of services tends to reduce parents' daily hassles. But just to illustrate what we're finding from daily hassles, for example, when parents are asked about what really makes your day a problem, what kinds of things create trouble for you, here are the examples of some of the top hassles that we see for parents. Getting my child ready in the morning, making alternate child care arrangements when my child is sick, staying in contact with a classroom teacher about day-to-day things. And we think, although we haven't analyzed the data from this study yet to bear this out, but based on other research we've done, that having the two educators in the classroom, the teacher and the ECE, greatly improves the communication with parents because you have two people to talk to and a bigger surface area to get into contact with school if you're a parent. So we see things that are really beneficial about this arrangement for engaging parents. So I want to talk about children and say that this study has gone into depth in directly testing children in a friendly, fun way. and the results on almost every measure show that the children in full-day early learning kindergarten programs are ahead of their counterparts in matched control sites that didn't have the benefit of a full day of this excellent program. They, I'm sure, had excellent half-day programs, but more of this new model appears to be really beneficial. Vocabulary is assessed by a method that shows children pictures, asks them to correctly identify them, early reading, phonological awareness, understanding the sounds that make up language important to reading, early writing, samples from children in control and full-day early learning sites, number knowledge, a real array of things. So I can just show you one data slide to illustrate the kinds of things that are being found. This slide shows on the left 2 bars for the control sites, which represent vocabulary and early reading ability. The 2 bars on the right represent the findings for full-day kindergarten vocabulary early learning. And you see that the bars for full day are higher than those for half-day control sites, significantly so. So that's characteristic of phonological awareness findings, early writing complexity, number knowledge, and so on. We also give children the opportunity to put themselves into this. It's not all direct testing, so you can ask children to draw things that represent their experience in these programs, and then you can look at those drawings systematically, and one of the things you can do is to rate the complexity of those drawings. So in this slide on the left, we see the control group complexity in their drawings. On the right, the red bar, we see the full day, and this is one slide that does have Best Start data in it, where the children in Best Start are sort of doing in between what the control and full day children are doing in terms of complexity of drawing. There's also the opportunity to ask, what are the kids drawing? And you see that the biggest bar is play. So that takes us back to the question of what about play and what's it good for? We know it's good for motivating children, for sure, and we know many other things as well, but the motivational part of learning is always a key. The last thing I want to say is we want to find out what children's experience is directly. So we don't want to just test them. What are they thinking? What are they experiencing? So there are actual interviews with individual children using finger puppets. A child chooses a puppet, the interviewer has a puppet, and they talk to each other. It works beautifully. The puppet asks, what's your day like, from the time you leave home until you leave school and go back home again? Or what do teachers do? A whole list of questions, getting inside children's experience. It's really a rich way to hear from kids. And just one finding on the question, what do teachers do? And on the blue bar, it's the kids who said, well, teachers teach. And on the right, the green bar is teachers watch you, look at you, that is, assess. And it's interesting, in the half-day traditional, well, not traditional, but half-day programs, the control programs, teachers are said to teach more and, to teach more, whereas in the Best Start and full-day kindergarten sites, there's less mention of teaching. So that would be more of the direct instruction that is perhaps a more traditional way of working. The final thing, what do parents think about all this? It exactly replicates what you people showed in your comments, very rich, thank you. But this shows it comparatively, how well do they think it's working for their kid in many different realms, control group versus full-day early learning. And you see that the parents are reporting better better results in full-day early learning. So thank you, and I'm sorry I went over, but typically I lecture for an hour or hold seminars for 3 hours, so 10 minutes is unknown territory to me. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Crombie has a question.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I think we all agree with the benefits of full-day learning. Do you think you would see similar results if it were a full-day program like a Montessori?
Well, I think full day of any quality program is better than half day. And there are international data from really systematic studies to say, a half day is good if it's quality, but a full day is better if it's quality.
So since we had these international benchmarks, what do you think prevented us from taking this step to full-day kindergarten? Why have we waited so long? Why have we waited till now? Has it been simply a budget constraint, or has it been a philosophy? What do you think prevented us from moving forward since the results are out there internationally?
Yeah, well, I think it was a failure to understand the power of early experiences that are often not optimal, that can improve things for all kids. And there's so many lines of evidence that are coming together around that, like the economic arguments for societal benefit, but there are the studies of how the brain is sculpted, how self-regulation develops through emotional channels. I mean, there's a huge amount of research in all fields about the importance of what I started lecturing about 40 years ago with some key studies, but now it's just a burgeoning field. So every developed country is, getting on this wavelength if they're not there already. So I think it was an accumulation of knowledge about the importance of doing this. That's my judgment.
That, and I suppose taking a champion like the Premier who wanted to put a focus on this success by 6 early learning, making it
and a lot of people who led the Premier to that point, local people, Fraser Mustard was an Ontario champion who is known around the world for his work, but he was a major force in moving us to where we were, and he was a personal mentor to me. I spent the last 3 years visiting his house every week to sit down and talk about these things, where people from around the world would come and talk about this growing excitement. So I think that's sort of in the more academic community, but Fraser transcended the academic world. And I was thinking about your question on play. Fraser Mustard said, well, play, that's just problem-based learning.
Oh, here you go.
And you may not know that he was Dean of McMaster Medicine and revolutionized medical education at McMaster by introducing problem-based learning, where university kids, medical students, played with ideas and solved problems, just like children in the classroom do that in kindergarten, where they become engaged in play. And at the time when he did that, 25 years ago, the medical community was aghast. The people at Toronto and Harvard said, this is sacrilege. And now they're all doing problem-based learning. So, rather than worry about, let's push down traditional methods of rote learning, I say, let's push it up. Let's push up the playful, motivating approach into higher levels.
My final comment, and I don't know if it's relevant, maybe you may think it might be, the elimination of grade 13, but the addition of, full-day kindergarten, it's a trade-off I wouldn't have made. I would have wanted both, frankly. I think keeping our kids in school longer is to benefit to everyone.
Yeah, I think it's lifelong learning, but it starts
but they're too young to go into university at 17, I think.
It starts in pregnancy.
Okay, I don't have any other speakers on the board. I do have one question for you, however. What about the 2 and 3-year-olds? Is the same kind of philosophies that are being looked at and introduced for 4 and 5-year-olds, do you feel that's the same for 2 and 3-year-olds, that in fact they should be in environments where for a full day, or is there a particular age when that should be introduced?
Well, you know, if you go back to the Pascal report, he envisioned a platform that would be there at birth. And at birth wouldn't mean putting new babies into group settings where they'd be expected to play together, because we know that wouldn't work out so well in the first 6 months of life. You know, you can start to do that at a year. But that's where parental leave provisions, you know, that we have some of that good start in Canada, but maybe that could be lengthened. But it's really a platform that would support parents in parenting, not just have children in group learning settings. And both of those things together, I think, are important to have before age 4. And, you know, where there are options and people aren't expected to take their child. The medical community was aghast, you know, the people at Toronto and Harvard said this is sacrilege, and now they're all doing problem-based learning. So, you know, rather than worry about let's push down traditional methods of rote learning, you know, I say let's push it up. Right. Let's push up the playful, motivating approach into higher levels.
My final comment, and I don't know if it's relevant, maybe you may think it might be, the elimination of grade 13, but the addition of, you know, full-day kindergarten, it's a trade-off I wouldn't have made. I would have wanted both, frankly. I think keeping our kids in school longer is to benefit to everyone.
Yeah, I think it's lifelong learning, but it starts
but they're too young to go into university at
really.
17, I think.
It starts in pregnancy.
Okay, I don't have any other speakers on the board. I do have one question for you, however. What about the 2 and 3-year-olds? Is the same kind of philosophies that are being looked at and introduced for 4 and 5-year-olds, do you feel that's the same for 2 and 3-year-olds, that in fact they should be in environments where for a full day, or is there a particular age when that should be introduced?
Well, you know, if you go back to the Pascal report, he envisioned a platform that would be there at birth. And at birth wouldn't mean putting new babies into group settings where they'd be expected to play together, because we know that wouldn't work out so well in the first 6 months of life. You know, you can start to do that at a year. But that's where parental leave provisions, you know, that we have some of that good start in Canada, but maybe that could be lengthened. But it's really a platform that would support parents in parenting, not just have children in group learning settings. And both of those things together, I think, are important to have before age 4. And, you know, where there are options and people aren't expected to take their child to an early education child care setting, but that would be an option for the 60 to 70% of parents who are working in the preschool period and need child care. And a lot of child care is really bad quality, and it's hard for people to recognize what's good and what's bad, and, you know, maybe because we don't want to know that it's bad. And I told you that I went through that personal journey myself of trying to find good child care for my parents with mixed success. So I think we need a platform that includes quality child care as part of it, but also parent support programs for parents who are eager to understand how to help their children learn before age 4, like the family literacy programs that have gone on in Peel, you know, the Lion project rolling into neighborhoods. I mean, there's some really innovative ideas here. And I think, you know, we don't stop at 4 years of age and say, okay, well, we'll just let that kind of fragmented mix of things go on the way it has. I think we need a platform as envisioned in the Pascal report.
Thank you. Councillor Moore?
Thank you. And thank you for your presentation. I think we've all known instinctively for many years that full-day kindergarten or those kinds of settings for children would be benefit and net great results. I guess if I was the parent of a child today that is not going into a full-day kindergarten program, or one that has already been through JK and not had the benefit of this, I might be a little bit anxious or alarmed
Yeah.
that somehow my child is being disadvantaged. I guess
Yeah.
I'm kind of concerned about how we convince those parents that their children are not being disadvantaged. I mean, Jim did his presentation this morning. He says 20% of children in the province are benefiting from full-day kindergarten. That means 80% of the parents right now are going to say, my children are being disadvantaged. How do we assure them that they're, just because they're not, that there's things that they can be doing, there's things that they should be looking for in a daycare provider? How do we help them through that transition?
Well,
As I look at the folks around here, I don't know any of us who went to junior kindergarten
No, that's a great
or
question.
full days. So you did? Oh, well, it shows.
And, you know, all of this isn't just about the evidence and the research and the logic. It's also a political issue, an emotional issue for the parents who had children a generation ago and may be annoyed that all this is coming along now, or the parents who happen to miss the boat as it leaves at different speeds in different places. And I think that is a political problem, and you people are much more expert on those issues than I am, so I don't want to advise you. But I do think part of the answer is to have them understand that this isn't just a gold-plated, you know, program for these kids who happen to be lucky enough to have it. It really should be the beginning of an approach that if you're a parent who missed this but have a child in kindergarten, that maybe our whole educational system will become more oriented to a holistic approach to development, community involvement, supports for parents and families that, you know, our school system hasn't been able to afford. But I think there are ways of achieving that through partnerships, that community approach with partners that can help at higher grade levels throughout the school system and even before.
Well, and I think it is an opportunity to heighten the awareness of parents generally of the value of play, the role that they play, the kinds of activities that they can be doing. I mean, the early years centers that we have are well subscribed. We need more of them, and we need, you know, to get the word out to young parents, particularly in our very diverse community, of the need to sort of seek out those opportunities, those play dates for their children.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we have to get the message out. This is a support to families and children. It should be part of a new movement that eventually everyone will benefit from, even those of us who left parenthood a long time ago. I have grandchildren coming up, but there's also those arguments about investment. So, you know, why should, you know, the young 20-year-old male who's going to wait another decade to get married care about any of this? Well, you know, if he's a smart 20-year-old male and he's been through a good education system, you can say, well, look, you know, you're going to benefit as a taxpayer by not having to pay for as much special education. So, you know, I think we have to argue on a lot of fronts and bring the information to people. And
20-year-old is probably still living at home with his parents.
Right. Well, I'm sorry then. Again, I'm going back to my dated experience. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To have to wrap this up, I wanted to thank you very much, Dr. Corder, for coming today and sharing your knowledge and experience with us. It was greatly appreciated.
It was an honor to be here.
Oh, thank you. And I think we're going to invite Lisa Duarte back up to the microphone to wrap things up for this morning's meeting. I do need a motion to receive the presentation, moved by Councillor Moore, seconded by Councillor Mahoney. All in favor? That's carried.
Okay, I just wanted to revisit the meeting objectives, which I think are going to appear. There they are. What we were trying to accomplish in this meeting today was to ensure that you as the task force have a comprehensive understanding of the provincial vision and legislation regarding early learning and childcare in Peel, and across the province. Full-day kindergarten implementation and the challenges and successes around that, the extended day program, admission process and flex boundaries, and the need for system transformation. What we didn't cover today in great detail, and I think we do need to come back to, is the system on 0 to 3.8-year-olds. So we really focused today on the kindergarten piece, the 4 and 5-year-olds, but we think we do need to provide you with some more information on the system as it relates to the younger group. So we will do that in a future meeting. But I would just like to confirm, if we didn't give you enough information or if you still have questions, we need to know this because we can't move forward if we haven't provided you with the information you need. So, David?
Are we going to get a copy of Jim's presentation circulated to the task force?
Yes, you will.
Thank you. Okay, before we adjourn the meeting today, if there's anything in addition that members, after listening to the presentations today, would like to be brought forward, you can provide them to the Commissioner in writing, and we will see. I guess the whole thing is to try and ensure that everybody has all of the information that they want at the end of the day to make the right decision on this issue. So even though we do have a prescribed list of meetings and a prescribed agenda for you, I'm sure there's lots of opportunity for flexibility and change if it's felt that it's needed by the task force. Okay, Chair Cole?
Madam Chair, I just was wondering one thing. We didn't really at the beginning of the meeting indicate that this is over air because Roger is advertising this process. And maybe I just wondered if at our next meeting we need to do a little more in the presentation in inviting the citizens out there, understanding why we're really going through this process. They may not be aware that we had a staff report that suggested how we might help the other 97% of those people that are out there, the small amount that we're helping and subsidizing daycare. And the reason why we're sort of going through this process so that we as council and everybody out there can understand why we're going through there, so that at the end of our exercise and meetings that we're going through there, the goal that we want to really achieve is because we're such a small part of the daycare centers out there, and there is 445, I think, private sectors out there that we also work with. So maybe just if you could take that and kind of consider how we might do that at the opening of the next meeting. Okay?
Great, thank you very much. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
Sure.
Moved by Chair Cope. All in favor? That's carried.
Maybe we could just give everybody 5 minutes for a refreshment time, and if you want to grab a coffee or something, and come back, and then we'll start our council meeting. I'll give you 10 minutes or so to do that. Thank you.